What's up guys, my name is Tarik. I'm a volunteer here at MiniWarGaming and I'll be bringing you coverage of Total War Warhammer 2.
We play and call it work.
Now I'd like to start off by disclosing that Creative Assembly has very kindly given us keys, a bunch of keys to try out the game, give our impressions, and that's what the focus of the video will be. If you guys are watching this as a way to make an informed decision on your purchase, please keep those two things in mind. The fact that we've been given keys to the games and that I have very positive outlook toward Creative Assembly and their games. So keep that in mind. Please keep this as a supplement. I'll be mentioning this at the end of the video. Please keep this, make sure that if you're watching this, I hope this gives you entertainment. I hope you really enjoy watching it. I hope it is informative. But use it as a supplement to any of the other reviews or impression videos that you find to make an informed purchase. If you're watching this to enjoy and be entertained, I hope you find that here as well. So I'm going to start off by explaining the way I intend the video series to be organized. Here on this video, I'll be explaining the solo campaign, my solo campaign impressions, and I played the Skaven for a couple of turns. Next, we'll be doing a co-op campaign impressions video with Quirk. So Quirk will be joining me and we'll be talking and discussing and adding our own perspectives on the campaign as a whole and the way it works in a co-op setting. So is it enjoyable? Is it fun? Is it not? We'll mention those in that video as well. After that, I intend to do a 2v2 campaign. And that means, 4 players, each player will be controlling one of the 4 major factions. And we'll be able to see how the 4 factions play out. It'll just be more of an entertainment thing, something for you guys, something that you guys will hopefully enjoy. And then, now I had intended to do like a huge 4v4 battle with as many people as we could get in the office, but unfortunately, due to film schedules and time constraints and life responsibilities, I don't think that's going to be very possible. So we have to relegate it down to 2v2 only. After that, we'll be doing a faction focus, so we'll be focusing on each of the 4 major factions in Total War Warhammer 2. We'll be explaining the nuances and the mechanics in both the campaign aspect and the battle aspect, and we'll be discussing those. Those won't be in the co-op campaign, or not as much in the co-op campaign impressions and the solo campaign impressions, which is this video, but we'll be going way more into the meat of it once we get into that. First, we want to give our impressions of the game, to make sure that, one, that you guys are informed, so you guys know, okay, is it a good game or not? We'd like to give our opinion on that. And again, if you want to make an informed purchase, here's our opinion. But please do make sure that you use other video sources to make it a more informed decision before you make your purchase. If you guys have anything you'd like to see specifically in this video series, please leave it in the comment section below. And I'll try and get to it as soon as I can, so that I can make sure to bring out that content for you guys, so you guys can have the things that you're looking for, at least with regard to this video series. So please do feel free to leave a comment in the sections below. And also, if you have any advice or criticism, anything at all, any feedback, I love to hear feedback. I love feedback. So please do leave your feedback, because I really do appreciate it. I do look at it and I like to improve. So we'll start off with the solo campaign impressions, and before I start, I'm going to tell you guys how I intend to structure this video, the solo campaign impressions. First, I'm going to explain what the campaign map is and what you do in them, and what the battles are and what you do in them, for any new players who are out there, because I realize this video might be, you might be watching this and you might not know what Total War is or what Total War Warhammer is. You might have heard of it, maybe like in the news or from a friend, but you haven't really played the game or haven't tried it, and you're curious but you don't know, or you might not be curious, in which case, hey, well, welcome to the video. But I'll be explaining that, so I'll give you guys a brief definition of what the campaign map is and what the battles are and what you do in them. And then I'll be explaining in more depth what it's like. So the impressions, the more opinionated aspect for both of those things. And what I'll be doing is I'll also be relating it to a few of the previous games, mainly the prequel, Total War Warhammer 1, but I'll also be relating it to other games that are outside the more historical titles, Total War Shogun 2, Total War Rome, Attila, that sort of thing. I'll also try to relate it to the tabletop games, since you guys are mainly here at MiniWarGaming. We play tabletop, so we're going to try and relate it to the tabletop aspect as much as we can. Again, I've only played a couple of games, but there's an attempt in everything. Finally, I'll be giving my own personal opinions on the game, my positive points and my concerns. I'll be mentioning both. So the positives and the negatives, at least in my opinion. And if you disagree, feel free to just mention in the comments. Again, I love comments, I love feedback, because I like to read. I don't get enough of that in my free time. All right, so let's start off with the campaign map. We'll start off with the campaign map. We'll talk about the campaign map, and then we'll talk about the battles. The campaign map is essentially where you manage your large-scale, faction, your domain, whatever it is, your kingdom, whichever faction you decide to choose. In Total War, that's how it works. You have your buildings, you have your settlements, and you have your armies. And you build those armies based on the settlements that you have, the buildings that you have. So buildings are like armory, they could be military buildings, so armory, barracks, or barracks equivalent, that sort of thing. And then you also have your economic building, so things that give you money, things that give you growth, population growth to increase the settlements, that sort of thing. There's a lot of nuances there, but I'll try and not delve into it as much. So that's the definition of the campaign map, and what you do with the campaign map. It's just a large map, and you control your units and your buildings and settlements there. The campaign itself is set in the 4 continents of Nagaroth, Ulthuan, the Southlands, and Lustria. Those are the 4 continents that it's set, and those are separated by bodies of water, as you might know from the Warhammer lore. The way the campaign is focused, or the way the campaign works, is there is an objective. The Vortex is a gigantic spinning vortex, based on the name, the Vortex, and each of the factions are trying to do something to it. Namely, the High Elves and the Lizardmen are trying to stabilize it, whereas the Dark Elves and the Skaven obviously are trying to control it and use it to manipulate its powers for their own devious ends. A central focus of the game, but in this case it's not a separate faction, it is an environmental effect that has taken place, and the factions have to try and control it. There's a new sort of mechanic that you have to do, and how that interacts with the other races is that each of the races have these rituals or curses depending on which of the factions you use. So, for example, I was playing Skaven. And Skaven have these 4 curses, and you can choose each one of them, and after a certain number of turns, I believe once they end, you get a certain amount of influence over the vortex. The vortex is, more close to you. Apparently, if you see a faction that is putting up a ritual, you can actually tamper with the ritual. So it seems very interesting in the way that they've made that. So the way you achieve victory is once you gain control or stabilize the vortex. That's kind of the main focus, and of course you can win in either way. You can just destroy all the other factions, and then nobody is controlling the vortex, only you. In Total War Warhammer 1, you couldn't control all of the settlements on the map. Now, the reasoning behind that for Creative Assembly was that they want to add, again, this challenge. They didn't want a faction to reach a certain point and then just steamroll over everything. Here, they've done away with that. So, in this case, every faction can take control of a settlement, but the repelling mechanic here is that certain factions find certain settlements appealing to live in. The climate is suitable for those factions to live in. Other cities will have unsuitable climates. And so if you go to an unsuitable climate, you'll have very large debuffs. You can take control of it if you wish, but you'll get penalties for taking control over that. The fact that it's there is very interesting. It's a very interesting way that they took the game compared to the first game. The first game was, again, you could only take this part of the map. If you're dwarves, you can only take this. If you're Empire, you can only take the other half. You can't, you know, control if you're an Empire, if you were Empire, you couldn't control a dwarf whole. So I think that's a very interesting addition to the game. Again, the way the campaign map is set up is that you have the 4 continents, and they're separated by bodies of water. Okay. Now the problem is, if they're separated by bodies of water, and there's quite a bit of water, at least from my gameplay, like there seem to be quite a few sections of water, and again, between those 4 continents. So the question then becomes, okay, do you add naval battles? Are there naval battles? What is water combat like? As far as I know, I don't believe there are naval battles in Total War Warhammer 2, just like they weren't in Total War Warhammer 1. Maybe it's a licensing issue, I don't know, but for whatever reason, Creative Assembly decided not to add naval battles in Total War Warhammer 2, as far as I know. Considering that there are bodies of water in this campaign map, and the fact that you can only auto-resolve naval battles in, you know, in Total War Warhammer, and apparently Total War Warhammer 2, I don't know how that'll affect gameplay. Does that add more, because now you have to consider whether or not you want to sail your armies across the ocean? That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, oh, I can't really do anything with this. I can only auto-resolve in these naval battles on this campaign map that has very large sections of water and very large bodies of, you know, divisions between lands of water. And so the fact that water is more prominent here than it was in Total War Warhammer 1, where Total War Warhammer 1 was just basically one gigantic landmass, here it's split into 4 different landmasses. How does that affect gameplay? I don't know, and I'm concerned that it'll affect gameplay negatively, just because, you know, again, you're auto-resolving naval battles, and if your armies are gonna spend more time in the water, you know, what does that mean? Next, we'll talk about the battles. Now, for the campaign, for the most part, other than the things that I've mentioned, much of it is the same. You're still controlling your settlements, you're still building your buildings, you're still moving your armies from point A to point B, all on the campaign map. Other elements, like all the other stuff, other than the vortex and the rituals and the curses, the other differences that you'll find are more faction specific. So we'll be focusing on those in the faction focused videos. The battles are very similar. The battle mechanics are very similar. You still have, you know, your platoons of whatever, clan rats, high elf spearmen, archers, that sort of thing. They're all in phalanxes, they're all in positions, you know, formations. You still have the, you know, group controls, and, you know, very, very much the same way as past Total War games. And different factions do play quite differently. Other than those faction-specific things, there's not much to say about the battles themselves, especially mechanics-wise. The tutorial, very similar to the campaign, explains things very well, especially for a new player. Total War Warhammer 2's tutorial, as far as I've seen, does a really good job of explaining everything. Steve and Cork said this, and they're quite new to Total War Warhammer or Total War games in general. So again, Steve, you know, has never played Total War, and Quirk has played a little bit, but not as much as Luke and I have. So the animations, like from a graphical perspective, the animations are spectacular. It is super fun to see like 5 clan rats lumbering toward a high elf lord, and they all just like smother over him, or they jump. You can see, like, you know, rat ogres, like, you know, leap 10 times in the air and then crash into a bunch of high elf spearmen. Queek head taker, you know, again, like, you know, kind of doing like a weird, like, you know, dual wielding, dual, whatever. I don't know how to say words, but it's super fun to watch. And the maps, the battle maps are super they're really beautiful. They're really nice to look at. It really adds to the cinematic effect of the game. If you really like to scroll into your units and watch them fight and battle and do like these weird moves and like stab and jump and leaping, and for me, I find that really entertaining, really fun to watch, and so it has plenty of that. With relation to tabletop, we get to the tabletop finally. I've played a couple of 8th edition fantasy battles, the ones with the phalanxes, not Age of Sigmar, fantasy battles. Now, the tabletop version was super fun, all right? You have your phalanxes, you have your positions. Positioning is super important. Most people, or some people argue positioning is important. Others would argue that shooting is important. It's all there in Total War Warhammer 2, at least in my experience. In my view, I feel like the tabletop version and the video game version are very similar, if not more exciting in the tabletop in the video game version. That's my view. Now, again, I'm a young guy with lots of gray hair and I'm balding, so I'm not really that young. But listen, stop, please. But I do like the more dynamic aspect of the video game Total War Warhammer 2. So I prefer that over the turn-based. One thing that I know a couple of people were annoyed about in Total War Warhammer 1 was that you couldn't customize your own armies. I know in Shogun 2 that you kind of were able to. You could choose their colors and you could choose their, the Shogun symbol. So you could have like you could have like a lotus flower, you could have like a ninja star or something like that. Those were in Shogun 2 and they weren't in Total War Warhammer 1. So a lot of people were a little bit upset, especially considering that, a lot of the aspect of this hobby is that you have your own dudes, your own guys, you model them, you paint them, that sort of thing. I don't think it's in here as either. So it's not in Total War Warhammer 2, but in Creative Assembly's defense, I think that makes sense because you're playing the end times in this game. And in the first game, and in this second game, and I'd expect the third game as well, you're playing the heroes of the end times. You're playing Grimgor Ironhide. You're playing Queek Headtaker. You're using those armies and those known factions, those people. And so it only makes sense that these are factions, these are heroes, these are units that are present in the historical lore, and so it only makes sense that you're using them. In a skirmish, I think that argument kind of slips because you can just use your own army. You can, fight off other armies, and you can say, hey, this is whatever high elf faction from this high elf domain, and they're the I don't know what elf speak is. So it's not here. I don't think it detracts from the game, though. In my personal opinion, I think it's it's just like an addition kind of thing. Now, my personal opinions. I'm going to start off with the positives and then go on to the negatives. Personally, I'm super excited to play the game and finish the campaign because I started the Skaven campaign. I started it off. I played it. I'm really excited to see and explore the rest of the map, to see what it's like. On top of that, I'm really excited for when they come out with the Mega Edition. So when they, or not the Mega Edition, but when they fuse the two maps of Total War Warhammer 1, Total War Warhammer 2, I'm really excited to see how that works out. I'm really excited to use, any of these factions, Skaven or Lizardmen or Empire, that sort of thing, and control like a large portion of the map, fighting like different factions. And if you have Total War Warhammer 1 and you're keen on getting Total War Warhammer 2, I think you'd probably feel the same way. It's certainly a very big draw. It was one of the reasons why I personally got Total War Warhammer 1. New factions have their own playstyle. There's a different take on the campaign. It's no longer a horde of armies coming in like it was in Attila, like it was in Total War Warhammer. No, now there's a vortex that you have to, stabilize or control and master. So there's a new element, and I'm really excited to see how that plays out with regard to the campaign. I'm really interested to see how that works, how that affects the gameplay and how that affects everything. So stuff that at this point really, it almost feels like Triumph and Treachery, except that you're playing against other computer players. So, there's always this, you know, like you're backstabbing this one, making alliances with this person, trying to get to the center and elevate your own position over that of the others just to gain an extra advantage over the other players, or the AI players in this case. So again, for me, I feel like it's essentially it's almost like Triumph and Treachery, except on a very grand scale. Now, there were still a number of concerns that I had, and I had mentioned these before. The concerns were about the water and the naval battles, and that's one concern. Another concern is about the replayability. How replayable is it? In my experience, you can still replay the game a number of times. Orcs, I've played a number of times just because I love I love the faction. Empire is very replayable in Total War Warhammer 1. I'm curious to see, I'm not concerned, so maybe it's not really concerned, but I'm curious to see whether or not the factions are replayable here. And it's something that I like to keep in mind just in case, because you don't know, right? It's essentially a new game. So are the factions replayable? Is it possible to finish a campaign, start up a new one with the same faction and get an entirely different experience? Possibly. Most likely, I would say. But, you know, you never really know until after you've finished the campaign, until after you've finished your thing and everything is done, then you roll another campaign. My experience with other Total War games, it's super replayable, super fun. You can always replay it, and you can always expect a different experience every single time, depending on your decisions, depending on the path that you take. So, not as concerned, but still something to bring up as a point. With regard to the army painter, as I mentioned, I'm indifferent. I don't mind. If they put it, great. If they didn't, it's not a huge problem for me. Again, with regard to the army painter thing, I'm very indifferent to it. It's not a make or break thing for me. It's not a problem. But again, I feel like I need to mention it for you guys, so you guys know what to expect when getting the game. Now, as closing, my recommendation, I don't know how Creative Assembly will feel about this, but I have to say I'd wait. I wouldn't pre-order. I'd wait to see what it's like, to see what its performance is like, to see how different levels of devices work and use the game. Now this is an approach that I take to most games because I've been burned before by a pre-purchase decision that I made. I told myself never again. So my opinion is that, hey, maybe not pre-purchase. So you're not spending on something that may eventually get ruined. It's super fun, it's super enjoyable. If you pre-purchased it and you are 100% sure that you want it, hey, go ahead, man. And if you disagree with the pre-purchase decision, or my pre-purchase opinion, by all means. I mean, it's a free world. You have every right to believe whatever you want to believe. My opinion is, and this is not just with regard to Total War Warhammer 2, so it's not just like a Creative Assembly thing. This is for any game in its entirety. I believe that it's probably better to wait until after release, see what it's like, see how it performs, see if there are any issues that are broken, and if it seems to work fine, if people aren't having that many issues and everything is okay, go for it. You can purchase it. And especially with, as far as my experience with Total War Warhammer 1 and its replayability, I think it's worth the dollar amount. So if I'm playing it a lot and I'm enjoying it a lot, I'm extracting a lot of enjoyment out of it, that means I'm getting a lot of value out of it, and so the monetary value of the game is perfectly fine. I think it's worth it. With regard to the pre-purchase though, I mean, I don't think so, unless you really want that the Norska tribe for free. I mean, again, that's your decision. So again, I am a Total War fan, so you please understand that I need to reiterate the stuff that I said at the beginning. I'm a huge Total War fan. I really love the Total War games, and also Creative Assembly has given us the keys. So the fact that they've given us the keys, and the fact that I have very positive outlook on the Total War games based on my experience. Please take that into account when you are watching this video and intending to make a purchase. But again, if you want my opinion, I think it's super fun. I think it's super enjoyable. I think it's worth it, especially if you have Total War 1, and hopefully if they have the if they fuse the two maps together, I think it's going to skyrocket the value, at least in my opinion, because you just have like a huge map. Like, that's awesome. Total War Warhammer 2 is out on Steam, or is going to be out on the 28th, I believe, on Steam. It's $71.99 Canadian, or your currency equivalent. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys found it informative and entertaining. And I hope to see you guys in the next video series. Happy wargaming, guys. Have a good one.